Sometimes the smallest steps in the right direction can lead to the largest leaps in our lives. And the truth is, a life can be launched with as little as an uplifting word or an act of kindness by someone who compassionately cares. The next voice we will hear from is a member of our community that has launched the lives of so many children in the right direction. Through her acts of kindness and compassion. Tonight, she will use her voice to speak for some of the children in the world who are so often left unheard. Please welcome to the stage, Christine.
In 2002, I joined the International Committee of the Red Cross. I joined because I wanted to see Asia do heroic deeds transporting food in large trucks to refugee camps. I was sent to Africa, and I was informed that I was to speak and have tea with the colonels who were in charge of the detention facilities. Some sweet talk, keep our foot in the door in case conflict arises again. Then we'll be able to access the prisons in times of conflict according to the Geneva Conventions because of the prisoners of war that would be kept there. 2 weeks into my mission, there was a mass demobilization, lots of troops, and many minors among them. These minors had to be brought home. My job description changed overnight. I was working with the ICRC, the International Committee of Rapid Changes. So, our family tracing unit went to the transit center where the demobilized children were kept. They had shelter, food, medical attention, psychosocial support, and even some education, maybe for the first time in their lives. The team would go in and ask questions. What's your name? Who are your parents? Where do you come from? It wasn't always an easy task. Some of them were so traumatized, they just couldn't really remember. And some were so young that they couldn't absolutely remember because they just didn't simply remember anything. But then there was this third group. They were the ones that unfortunately had performed such terrible atrocities that out of shame, they didn't want to return home. These ones often led us on wild goose chases, on backwater roads, in the middle of the jungle, but we knew it was a reason to it. It was to gain their confidence and their trust, and we just had to be patient with them. So, who are they? Not only boys, are they? As you can see, there's 300,000 child soldiers in the world today, at this very moment. 40% of which are actually girls. And in 18 different countries in the world. 100,000 of them have been demobilized in the last 20 years. During my 6 years with the ICRC, I didn't see many girls, actually. So, but we were aware that they were around, but often they became pregnant and were left behind and couldn't keep up with the rest. Or simply, they weren't considered important enough to demobilize, and they did not reap the benefits as the men and the boys did. Next, please. Where are they? This is a map from 2016. It has changed a little bit since I was dealing with the issue. There are some countries that are off the bad boy list, but it's because their conflicts were over. Unfortunately, children are just too useful in armed conflict. Next, please. So what do? Can we go down the list, Tristan? Fighter, obviously. Bodyguards. The most loyal bodyguard a commander can have is a 10-year-old. They will do anything for that uncle figure, that paternal figure. Next. A spy. Imagine these children running around. You've seen these pictures from Africa, how they run around. There's children everywhere. They can blend in, they can mix up. They won't be identified, they won't be recognized. Next. Porters. There's a lot of jungle roads, and when I say roads, they're actually paths. So there's not always vehicles that are handy. So you need people to carry things. And children in Africa are used to carrying things, heavy loads on their heads. So they are very practical to bring along. Next. Domestic help. Well, you need someone to cook the food and to wash the dishes. Accompaniment. Sometimes the fighters would bring their wives along with them, or they will pick up some wives on the way, voluntarily or not, and there will be children accompanying them as well. Next. Suicide bombers. Well, luckily that was one thing that Africa's pretty much avoided, but other places have not. Next. And sexual slavery as well, as a point. If we look at the picture up there, maybe you can I wonder if you can play with me on this one. So, child soldiers or children have always been part of conflict throughout time. But there has been quite an upsurge in recent history. Can anyone tell me why? Can you just shout out? Do you have any idea why it has become so much more dangerous and so many more? The picture might give you an idea. The weapon. Due to the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the 1990s, arms were flooding into developing countries, particularly Africa. An AK-47 is lightweight, it's durable, works well in water, easy to put together, and just perfect for a child to hold. Imagine the power this child has when she or he comes into a village. How the adults will bow to her or him. It totally turns upside down the whole hierarchical, rural, social community. The elders, the adults, are no longer in charge. It is the children who are speaking up and have the power. And imagine how it will be for this child when she goes back to her village after demobilization, because she may have done something in her own village. Next, please. Why use them? Little kid, but pretty scary if you meet one of those, wouldn't you say? Next. Kids are everywhere in developing countries. If you've ever been to one, you'll know, you'll see them everywhere. And they're very easy to find. So it's very practical. Next. Cultural age of maturity does vary between different nationalities and tribes. In some places, already at age 11, you are considered an adult. You have your rite of passage, and you participate in an adult manner. But we know very well that children at age 11 are not developed and don't have a maturity, mentally speaking, as well as physically, to endure such trials. Next one. Blind obedience. Once again, the commander is always obeyed. They follow. They will be the most loyal that you have in your faction. Next. And lack of mature moral judgment. I have met actually soldiers from South Africa who went to Angola to try to, when the war was there, and they met numerous child soldiers, but they would, if you blinked, you would lose your life because the child would not blink. Terrible thought. Next. And children recruit more children. They're much easier to get their peers to join, to say how exciting it is. There's so much to see, so much to do. And you travel. Next. And as I said, they're able to create as much damage as an adult with the same weaponry. Why would they do it? Well, as I told in my preamble, some have no choice. They're abducted. You have groups coming into villages, they can take children, or as children in Africa are often very independent at an early age because they have to go far away to get water, do tasks, go out to the fields. They are easy prey. They can be orphans, but let's understand in Africa, they have quite a wide definition of family. So there usually is someone to accept them. But in times of conflict, people run in different directions and flee, and they're not always able to find their family. And there's always the case of family rejection. If a couple splits up, divorces, the children that are over 12 usually stay with the father. And if the father gets a new woman, the woman would often not accept the first children from the first marriage. Promise of money, poverty, obviously, has a big role to play. They do go on raids, and it's rather violent, but it is promise of money. But as the war goes on, there is less to raid, and it becomes less promising. Cultural militarism. Well, every culture has their sort of envy or admiration for military. But there's also, there is that faction of once you have your rite of passage, you are a man, it is more attractive to take on manly duties such as guarding and so forth. Revenge. If your family or village has been attacked, you will normally join your own group to take revenge. Patriotism. This is often not linked to nationality, but rather to your clan, your tribe. Camaraderie. They seem to bond very much together. They develop their own families, in fact, and own social sphere. An adventure. Who wants to go out in the field and plow in the field and hoe away all day long under a hot sun? It's much more fun to join. Idleness. There's just not enough to do. And lack of prospects. So just the poverty and the lack of anything that you can do, you see no future for yourself, then obviously it's more interesting to join a group such as this. Next. What are the effects? This is actually, unfortunately, a rather common scene that you might see coming into your village. But I would like you to take a look at the children's faces and their bodies and so forth. The one in the Saints t-shirt, obviously, he's having a really great time, but if you look at his face, he doesn't seem so affected as, for example, the one with the bandana or the one holding the big gun on top of the Jeep, who have probably been in it for much longer. You see they get gaunt and sinewy. It's due to malnutrition and the work they have done. Next, please. Just put all of them up. So stumped by physical growth and psychological growth due to malnutrition, lack of mental stimulation. Trauma due to actions witnessed and even committed. Aggressive behavior, obviously through what you've seen and the trauma that you've experienced and the actions you've done. Drug addiction, the commanders often gave the kids drugs to get them, to speed them up. And the reintegration is rather difficult due to the stigma. So they are fearful to go back to their communities. Yes. So what can we do? That's a very good question. When I was creating this talk, I was advised to come with, well, what can Sooke do? And it's a bit difficult to figure that one out. And I even went online to say, what can a community do? Because in my mind, I didn't see it really clearly. Well, the most obvious is, you can become a delegate. And this person who is 10 years my junior is seeing off a child who is not a child soldier, but rather was separated and war affected, and being brought back to the other side of Congo. You can also obviously donate. You can advocate. for those who are war affected. And also just educate yourself to show some compassion towards those who are living in conflict zones or are coming from them. But I would like to take this one step further. I talked quite a little bit about idleness, the lack of activity, where some child soldiers would join because there was nothing else to do. Now, I'm not saying that Sooke children are going to become child soldiers, but they need something to do. They need to be active. So I would say, the African saying, as you know very well, it takes a village to raise a child. I witnessed that firsthand, how the villagers accepted their children, embraced them, welcomed them back home, tried to work with them so that they could get over these traumas and heal together, but also provide them with activities, with purpose, and to make them into adults that could contribute further in the community in the future. So I would like to challenge us all to do the same here, more so than we are today. I would like to say that we should embrace our children and our youth, give them our love, give them activities, much like this theater, I would say, so that they, in turn, will contribute to our community. Thank you very much.